When he was 9 years old, Robert and his childhood friend Mike weren't invited to a classmate's beach house because they were poor kids. Robert came home and asked his dad how to become rich, and the only response he got was, "You have to learn how to make more money." Even as a kid, Robert understood that this advice wasn't going to help him to become rich. Robert's father, whom Robert calls his poor dad, was a teacher and made a good living, but always struggled financially. Seeing how determined Robert and his friend Mike were to learn about making more money, Robert's dad, the poor dad, advised them to go and talk to Mike's dad, whom Robert called his rich dad. Both Robert and Mike were quite surprised because rich dad wasn't rich yet. Plus, he never finished 8th grade but ran multiple successful businesses. Nevertheless, they went to meet Mike's dad. On the day of the meeting, he asked them if they were ready to learn how to make money. They were excited and nodded their heads quickly. He then made them an offer. He said that he would teach them how to make money, but not in a classroom style. He would only teach them if they worked for him. According to him, he would be wasting his time if they just wanted to sit and listen as they did in school. They could learn faster if they worked for him. Robert wanted to ask a question, but he didn't give them a chance. He said if they couldn't make up their mind decisively, then they would never learn to make money. Opportunities come and go, and being able to know when to make quick decisions is an important skill. They knew they had to make a decision. Robert and Mike looked at each other and both agreed to take the offer. Mike's dad was pleased and said he would pay them 10 cents an hour, and they would work 3 hours every Saturday. Even though Robert had a softball game that day, he chose to work and learn instead of playing. He knew this was his opportunity, and he didn't want to waste it. So, Robert and Mike started working for Mrs. Martin, who was an employee of Mike's dad and used to take care of a small supermarket. They were the kind of stores where people bought essentials like milk, bread, butter, and cigarettes. The only problem was that the stores didn't have air conditioning, so they had to keep the doors wide open to the road and parking lot, which meant that dust would swirl and settle inside every time a car drove by. Their job was to take canned goods off the shelves, brush them with a feather duster to get the dust off, and then restack them neatly. It was mind-numbingly boring work. They worked for 3 hours every Saturday and got paid 30 cents, which was not very exciting for them, since one comic book cost 10 cents back then. They did it because they wanted to learn how to make money. But after 3 weeks of doing this, Robert was ready to quit. He felt like a slave, working for just 10 cents an hour, and hadn't even seen Mike's dad since the first meeting. So, at lunchtime on the 4th week, he told Mike that he was quitting. The school was boring enough, and he didn't want to waste his Saturdays doing this job anymore. He was done. To his surprise, Mike started smiling and said that his dad had expected this to happen. He had told Mike to meet with him when Robert was ready to quit. It made Robert mad, but Mike said that his father's way of teaching was different from Robert's parents. He didn't like to lecture and used experience as a way of teaching. Robert agreed to meet with Mike's dad the following Saturday to hear him out. Even his real dad was angry with Mike's dad. Robert's poor dad had advised him to demand a raise of at least 25 cents an hour and to quit if he didn't get it. When Robert arrived at Mike's house, he was made to wait in line for 45 minutes before Mike's dad finally appeared. He explained that he wanted them to experience life's push so that they could understand what he was trying to teach. When Rich Dad asked Robert what he had learned from working for such a low wage, he complained about his greed and lack of respect for his workers. He even threatened to quit if his rich dad didn't pay him more or teach him more. Rich Dad explained that most people would do exactly what he was suggesting: quit and look for a higher paying job. However, this usually wouldn't solve their problems. He wanted Robert to understand that waiting for a raise, thinking that more money would solve his problems, was not the solution. The solution is to make money work for you. Robert was slowly starting to understand the lesson Rich Dad was trying to teach. Rich Dad asked if Robert still had a passion to learn. When Robert said yes, he told him he was going to stop paying him for the work at the store. Robert was confused. He came for a raise, but now he was going to work for free? Rich Dad said that if he wanted to make more money, then he needed to use his head and figure it out. Robert and Mike worked for free for 3 weeks. One day, Mike's dad showed up and took the boys outside for ice cream. Rich Dad asked if they learned anything yet. They said no. The rich dad told them they better hurry and start thinking about the lesson that was staring at them. To explain the lesson, he asked the boys to look at Mrs. Martin and the people in the park and think if the life they were living seemed exciting to them. They worked hard for little money their whole lives, clinging to the illusion of job security and looking forward to a 3-week vacation each year and maybe a pension after 45 years of service. Rich Dad said if this kind of life excited them, he would be willing to offer them a raise of 25 cents an hour. Their heartbeats raised, and they knew it would mean so much to them, but still, they said no. Seeing their resistance, Rich Dad raised his offer to $1 an hour, then $2. Each time he raised his offer, Robert's heart started exploding, and his brain was pushing him to take the offer. He knew $2 an hour would have made him the richest kid in the world. He couldn't imagine earning that kind of money. He wanted to say yes. He could picture a new bicycle, a new baseball glove, and the adoration of his friends when he flashed some cash. But somehow his mouth stayed shut. Rich Dad was looking at 2 boys staring back at him, eyes wide open and brains empty. He was testing them, and he knew there was a part of their emotions that wanted to take the deal. He understood that every person has a weak and needy part of their soul that can be bought. And he knew that every individual also had a part of their soul that was resilient and could never be bought. It was only a question of which one was stronger. So he made a final offer of $5 an hour. Suddenly, the boys' expressions changed, and their empty looks changed into calmness. It felt their temptation disappear in the second. They felt the part of their soul that was weak and needy was silenced and taken over by the part that had no price. The rich dad said it was good they didn't have a price. Most people did because their lives were controlled by fear and greed. Fear of being without money makes them work hard and earn a paycheck. But once they have that money, greed gets them thinking about all the things they could buy, which makes them need more money, which makes them spend more and work more. It's what the rich dad called the rat race. Mike asked if there was another way, and Rich Dad said there was, but not many people knew about it. Mike wanted to know what it was, and Rich Dad said they would learn it while working with him for no pay. Mike asked for a hint, and Rich Dad replied that the first step is to tell the truth. When asked what truth, he replied that it was about how they feel, and they must confess it to themselves, not others. Rich Dad expressed doubt that the people working for him were capable of confessing their truth. Instead, they feel the fear of not having money and respond emotionally rather than logically. They do not confront their fear, and their emotions control their brains. They work to earn money, hoping it will relieve their fear. But it never does. Money governs their emotions and souls, and they refuse to acknowledge this truth. Rich Dad urged them to avoid this trap, stating that being rich does not solve the problem. When asked why, he introduced the other key emotion: desire. It's common for people to desire things that are better, prettier, or more exciting. They often work for money because they think it will make them happy, but the happiness from money is short-lived. Many rich people are actually driven by fear, thinking that money will make them feel secure. However, they end up fearing losing it all, which makes them more anxious than when they were poor. Emotions often control our thinking, and fear can lead us to make decisions that don't solve the real problem. For example, when someone is afraid of not having enough money, they might think getting a job is the only solution. But in reality, a job is only a temporary fix for a long-term problem. It's important to learn how to think for ourselves and not let our emotions control us.